Okay, well, I'm going to start this morning. There are people still hopping on. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kathy Shader, and I'm a consultant for Marshfield Clinic Health System and the Wisconsin After School Network. I will be moderating this series of webinars, and we are pleased to be offering this learning series with the Marshfield Clinic Healthcare System and the Wisconsin Department of Administration. Today's webinar is the second of a 5-part series for day camp programs in the state of Wisconsin. This series was developed in consultation with leadership from the American Camp Association Wisconsin Local Council of Leaders and the Wisconsin After School Network. We are pleased to have Polly Goddard give us a second in this series, both this week, and I will introduce her in a minute. A few housekeeping items before we begin. Please keep your microphones on mute. If you have questions, we ask you to post those in the chat box, which the Marshfield Clinic staff will be monitoring. We will be throughout this presentation, and as a reminder, this presentation is being recorded and will be sent to all registered participants in the next week. With over 20 years of experience using coaching principles and her leadership and management practice, Polly has honed her skills in engaging leaders, managers, and teams in the professional development process that drives forward momentum. Polly's ability to connect with employees at all levels, from individual contributors to CEOs, creates a space for them to identify opportunities and or challenges and address them to increase awareness, enhance outcomes, and engage in the development for improved performance and greater overall satisfaction. Her training in Gestalt coaching has reinforced her leadership, management, and communication skills. Polly works with groups, teams, and individual contributors to reach their fullest potential. And I've known Polly personally for the last 30 years. I will just kick this over to you, Polly. I won't give the anecdotal story I gave last week, but it is always a pleasure to have you join us, and I will turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Kathy. It's good to be here again. I'm thinking that I'm seeing some names that I might recognize from last week, so I'm glad I didn't scare anybody off and maybe encouraged you to come back again for more. There's a bunch of good stuff coming in this series, so I'm happy to be a part of it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will jump right in. So as Kathy said, I am a coach and a consultant, and so I do a lot of work with folks on all kinds of different leadership and management topics and those kinds of things. So I got to do just a little jockeying around here. I don't know why it jumps around your screen once you turn on your camera or turn on your screen. All right. So anyway, so I'm a coach and a consultant.
And she sent you a birthday card.
Oh, somebody's not.
She's got too much time on her hands.
Can you, whoever is there, can you mute, please? Okay, good. All right, so I am kind of a nerd about feedback, and the reason I became a nerd about feedback is because I've been on the receiving end of really bad feedback, whether it's just either absent, somebody is not giving me any kind of information to give me any feedback about what I need to improve, or when they do, they deliver it in a way that's, that frying pan to the forehead where you're going, I don't really know what to do with all of that. Or they give you these really non-specific pieces of feedback of things like, good job, or way to go, something like that, where I'm like, what was a good job in particular? What should I do more of? What should I do less of? Those kinds of things. So I really have dedicated a lot of time to this whole feedback process. And I don't love the word feedback, but it is the one that people use most often. I actually prefer to use the term growth and development. So I'll use those interchangeably as we go through today. Sorry, okay. Interesting pop-ups coming up here. Okay, so we're going to go through a couple of different things today. The first thing we're going to talk about is the importance of feedback. Why do we even want to get feedback, or why do we want to give feedback? If we want things to change or improve, we can't ignore that piece of giving feedback. It's really important. We're going to talk about and give you a couple of examples of really good ways to set the stage for having that productive feedback and having the relationships that lead to that productive feedback. You're going to walk away today with an actual feedback process. So something that you can refer to when you're starting to prepare yourself for any kind of a difficult conversation, or even just giving feedback that's good feedback as well. So you can't forget about that part. And then we're going to talk about developing that growth mindset, both for yourself and for your team or whoever. I like to think of this both when we're thinking about communication skills and all those kinds of things. I think of it both as professional and personal. So whatever works for you and whatever context is best for you, I'll focus on professional because I think that's mostly why folks are here today. But whatever setting works for you, please do that. But we want to be able to develop the growth mindset for folks, both for ourselves, for our team members, for anybody that we're interacting with. And the last thing on there, don't freak out. We're going to practice giving feedback. I swear there's a framework to it. I swear there's a little bit of role modeling there for it. So you don't panic. The people kind of sometimes see that and they go, I'm not doing that. It's not scary. I promise it'll be small supportive groups. So here we go. So in the chat, if you would share with me, if I can find the chat again, if you would share with me what on this scale of 1, nope, out of here. I do not like feedback. As soon as somebody tells me they're saying feedback, I'm running. Or 10, yeah, I love it. Bring it on. Yeah, I see it as a tool, those kinds of things. Where do you feel, how do you feel about feedback now? Whether receiving or both, maybe you average it out a little bit. Share that in the chat with me. What number comes up for you when you think about that? Chat. Go. Yeah, so we've got a 4, a couple of 8s, a 6, a 7, 10. Awesome. Lauren, maybe you could help me teach this. 7, 6, 8, 3, 3. Yeah, so oftentimes people are on wherever they land on that scale is because of an experience that maybe they've had in the past. If they've had people who've given them good feedback that's actionable, that they understand, that's fair, all of those kinds of things, they will lean more toward that 10 end. If it's been something that's been a punitive process or maybe it's a sneak attack from the side, something like that, they'll often lean a little bit more toward that, nope, I'm out of here. This is not a good experience for me. So I'm glad to see there's so many numbers above 5. That's great. That means that you're working in hopefully healthy situations and healthy relationships. But we can always improve. Ryan, if you could just check, I'm getting some feedback from somebody that's unmuted. If you could maybe mute everybody, that would be great.
I'll go through it again.
What's that?
I'll go through it again.
Okay, thank you. So when we think about feedback, we want to be able to shift people away from that idea of feedback is only punitive. I'm only getting it, once a year. Maybe I'm only getting it during my performance evaluation, or maybe during that 6-month evaluation, mid-year, something like that. It's not coming to me on a regular basis. We want to help people shift away from that into being able to have this growth and development mindset where there's a conversation. We move away from the idea that it's a formal, sometimes it has to be a formal conversation, but if you're starting to really build this into your daily practice, it just becomes part of the conversation. And at the end of it, you might end up actually having people thanking you for things that you wouldn't expect. I'll give you an example. I worked for a higher ed university here on the East Coast, and I worked with one of my dearest friends. We've been friends for 30 plus years. It's not Kathy, somebody else. And she hired one of her friends, somebody that I didn't know. And that person was just not, I'll call her Lisa. I actually can't remember her real name, but she wasn't getting the job done. And my friend ended up having to go out on a medical leave. And so that Lisa's inability to do the job was really landing on my plate. So I met with her a couple of different times and said, this happened and and got clear about what the expectations were. And then finally we got to the point where it just wasn't gonna work. And so I had to call my friend who was on medical leave and say, hey, I don't want to bug you on medical leave, but I really need to let your friend go. And she said, I trust you, do what you need to do. So I called Lisa up and I said, listen, so what I'm noticing is that the expectation is for you to be meeting with your students on a regular basis and to be, attending these team meetings and that's not happening. So do you feel like this is working for you, that this is the right fit for you? And after a conversation that was started in that way, rather than, hey, you're terrible, you're awful, I'm making this a miserable experience and I'm firing you, she and I both came to a place where it was like, well, this is really not working out. It's not the best fit for you. So, and her saying it's really not the best fit for me. I realize I'm not towing a line here. And so when we got off that conversation, even though it was a termination, she was like, thanks for that conversation. It really was that was what I needed to have right now. And it actually was a sense of relief for her as well. I think she didn't want to let her friend down also. So you can have conversations that will shift people from that feeling to that, oh, this is great. I do believe that you're investing in me. It takes some intention though, and we have to understand why feedback is important. And what we look at when we look at some of the statistics, we know that 96% of people want regular feedback, and 83% of those folks want it whether it's good or bad. So a lot of people, most people want feedback. They are probably not getting it, or they may not be getting it, or they may not be getting it in the way they want to, but they really do want to get feedback. And usually people want feedback because they want to be able to perform their best. They want to achieve the goals, accomplish the mission, whatever those things are. And 62% of people want it from their colleagues too. They don't just want it from their supervisor or, that top-down look at things. That's why something like a 360 review for when you're looking at a performance evaluation, that can be really helpful to get feedback, that annual feedback or something like that from that larger pool, whether it's from clients or colleagues or things like that. But on the day-to-day basis, creating that culture where people have conversations and give each other feedback as you go along in those sort of micro doses as the relationship is, or the tasks are happening or relationship is happening, that is really valuable and people really do want that. 28% say that their feedback is not frequent enough. Oftentimes it ends up being maybe twice a year or only when something is wrong. And so that ends up sort of shutting down that process as well. But conversely, 58% of managers actually think they're getting plenty of feedback, that they are giving plenty of feedback to their team members. So there's a disconnect there. That's a pretty big swing there in those numbers. We need to draw that closer together. And we do that by creating awareness about what's actually happening out there. 17% of people want more specific feedback. My example before, I said, hearing, oh, you did a good job. That's not specific enough for me. And that's not so specific enough for most people. Most people want to hear the specific things. You communicated really well about this subject and the client responded to you in this way. There was that positive connection there. Or the report that you put together was really clear and concise. It was very accurate, those kind of things. Those are very specific bits of feedback that people can say, okay, next time I'm doing a report, I want to look at how I did this one and model that and make sure that I'm replicating that effort. Same thing with maybe a client contact or whatever. What worked well about that client contact? Getting that feedback will help them to redirect that next time. But one of the things that we see is that managers say that fewer than 50% of employees actually act consistently on the feedback. So there's a part of this whole process that we're going to talk about today is understanding the fact that feedback can't be a one and done conversation. It really has to be that ongoing investment, that ongoing conversation about things. So if you ask somebody to change their behavior or to do something in a different way, it can't be something that they do differently for a little while and then it slacks back off or slides back into a bad habit or disappears altogether. It really has to be something that's sustainable. So part of that is in the messaging when you're giving the feedback and also in the follow-up when you're having conversations with people going forward to say, hey, I noticed that I gave you that feedback and you're doing really well with that. Keep that up. That's achieving exactly what I was hoping for, that kind of thing. And employees say that feedback really isn't helpful enough. So if it's specific, it also needs to be actionable. So you can say, you can give a specific piece of feedback, but if there's nothing that they can do about it, then that really kind of leaves them in a bind. So it has to be something that they can actually take and do something differently and act on in order for it to be helpful. And when we're thinking about how we address issues or how we think about when and where and how to address issues, we want to definitely look at situations that are nuggets. If we're seeing that's small and it's sort of emerging as a pattern, then that's when we want to take a look at it and address it. You'll notice that I used a gold nugget up there because I truly believe that there's so much good stuff that happens in those small moments, in those small issues or those patterns as they're emerging, that can really create value both in the relationship and for the organization. So it's not a lump of coal, although there's value to a lump of coal as well. But gold, sort of that gold nugget kind of says, oh yeah, there's something really, really valuable in there. So as we're thinking about when do we address this, we want to look at them when a pattern starts to emerge. And that pattern, we have to remember, it may be good or not so good. So if we're seeing that somebody is doing something well and we want that to continue, we want to give them feedback about that. Hey, I noticed that you've been doing this and that's working really well. Here's how we know that's working well. Keep going with that. Or the other side of it is, hey, I noticed this is happening. That's kind of getting in the way of the work that we're doing because ABC. So that needs to be addressed at that point as well. When we talk about patterns, patterns really start to emerge at 2 to 3 times. If you see something more than 3 times and you haven't addressed it, chances are we're on our way toward molehill, toward mountain, toward whatever those increments are between here and when it's a really giant situation. But really, that's when we should be thinking about something. Depending on what it might be, three might be good, 2 might be good. If it's something that's like, behavior, somebody's being really disrespectful to somebody, if it happens more than 2 times or happens 2 times, I'm going to cut that off very early. I'm not going to wait to see, is it 3 or 4 or 5 times that they're being disrespectful or they're behaving in this way that's not conducive to our team environment. I'm going to jump on that quickly. If it's something like this person's usually on time and they've just been, the last couple of weeks they've shown up late 3 or 4 times, that might be time when you just say, hey, I noticed that you're coming in late. What's going on with that? You're usually here on time, so there's something different here. And they can say, oh yeah, maybe my childcare is different for the next 2 weeks, or I have to drop my dog off at daycare at a different time this week, whatever it might be. And that just provides you with some information and it also gives them the insight that you're paying attention. You are tuned into what's happening. And if they allow that to become the new norm of coming in late, then you're going to be paying attention to that. So when you're thinking about those nuggets, you want to take the opportunity to dig in and find the source. If you wait until it gets to be mountain size, it's much harder to find the source. By that time, it's sort of changed and morphed, and things have happened in so many different ways, maybe, that it's hard to find what the source is, and therefore it's hard to unravel that or undo that kind of thing. So when you can do this and you figure out, you see, there's these nuggets, there's these patterns, I need to address it. By digging in, you'll understand what is happening and why it's happening. And then you have the opportunity to intervene early, to redirect that behavior. Again, you can do it both for positive or for something that's not so good. But that gives you the early intervention so that things are not really taking that deep root. It is more than common for people to just say, I don't want to deal with this. I'm just going to ignore it. It's going to go away, all of those things, and avoid or just not address issues. But when that happens, very rarely do they actually work themselves out. Most often it kind of snowballs and becomes this bigger thing. And again, it can start taking on sort of a life of its own. And maybe it's as the snowball grows, there's more and more that's getting caught up in it, all those kinds of things. So when we're thinking about those mountains, we have to cut those off at the pass, so to speak. We have to be thinking about how do we address it when it's really coming up early, because they only get harder and more complex to address. It physically, mentally, emotionally gets harder to address. It also gets harder because you have to tease out all the different contributing factors to it, all of those kinds of things. And avoiding it often has a cost. So it might be that disrespectful behavior that's gone unaddressed we're losing team members because people don't want to work with that person. Maybe we have to fire that person after a long time. They've got a lot of institutional knowledge, and we have to do this whole process to replace them, to train up a new person, to hire, to all those kinds of things. So there's the real costs and there's the figurative or costs that are maybe are less obvious. Rarely does anything ever get easier if you leave it alone. So if you are unsure if this is a pattern that's headed on its way from a nugget to a mountain, it's better to ask questions and get curious about it early than it is to make the assumption that it's nothing, it's no big deal. Because sometimes it's that the steam gets rolling a little quicker than you think it might. Okay, so we're going to go into a breakout room. And if you haven't used breakout rooms, I think it's pretty simple. Ryan's going to do all the magic behind the scenes, heavy lifting for us of getting you into the breakout room. There's going to be 4 or 5 people in the breakout room, and you're going to be in there for about 7 minutes or so. And what I really want you to discuss amongst each other and give everybody the opportunity to talk and come up with some different ideas about when you're receiving feedback, what is it that's there that will allow you to be open to that conversation? And if you haven't had that opportunity, if you haven't had a situation where you've gotten good feedback or, been able to be in that receptive mode during a feedback situation, I'm sorry. I'm hoping we can change that, make some adjustments here today. But imagine what would be in place if that was the case for you. And then, so what was present? What is it that works about that for you? So again, we're going to go into that breakout room for about 7 minutes. If you are in there and you have a question, feel free to hit the ask for help button. I think there is in the breakout room. And I think Ryan can drop me in there to answer your question. And otherwise, he will sweep you back to this room when we're done. So use that good time, introduce yourselves, and have that conversation. Any questions before we go into the breakout room? All right, Ryan, I think we're ready to go.
It looks like they're populating.
Yeah, looks like it. Are the folks left in the room, if you're not staff, are you having an issue? Just unmute yourself and let us know.
Start, Polly.
So hard when people don't have their cameras on, but
I know. Can't read the room, right?
yeah, I just go for it.
I'm taking notes, just so you know.
Oh, good.
Totally off subject, but when you said people not having their cameras on, because I believe just talking to a bunch of squares and you can't see anybody. But I also just read an article about how bad looking at yourself on Zoom is for your mental health, and particularly women. and how it causes women to self-objectify and become overly critical and can lead to like depression. And it was really an interesting article. I'm like, oh my gosh, I look at myself on Zoom all day or WebEx.
But when you tend to like hone in on yourself, right? I'm like, I should be looking at you, Jen, but I'm like, I'm always looking at me. Anyhow.
I know, it's hard not to, right? It's kind of interesting. The psychology around it all is interesting.
I've been talking and you can't hear me because I was muted. Yeah, there's apparently a setting that you can shut off that your camera, you don't see your camera, other people can see it. I don't know if it's true on WebEx, but there is on Zoom. But I just sort of am like, well, nobody's here because of what I look like anyway. Hopefully they're here just to get some knowledge from me. So it is what it is.
Yeah.
See me fussing with my collar. I'm like, it's not laying right yet.
I always mess with my hair. I'm like, yeah, it's terrible.
I just try to ignore the grays that are peeking out more and more and all that fun stuff. But
I'll send you the article, Kelly. I said I'll send you the article. I saw your comment.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm getting my hair cut and colored today in like 2 hours, and I'm like not gonna do my hair, so that's why I'm like, see ya later.
Yeah, but you're like, there's some people that you've got the headband on and you can pull that off. I can't pull that kind of thing off. It's like, I don't know, just.
Oh, you are adorable because I don't think I can, so I appreciate that.
See, yeah. You're very welcome. No, that you're right. I think, Jen, the whole like we're so much more critical of ourselves than other people are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that really what my face looks like? Oh my god.
Well, and it was just so fascinating how it impacts so many things. Like they gave women math problems and they did more poorly after watching themselves on video than they did previously, or they, just gave them different tasks and it impacted like your cognitive ability.
Fascinating.
It was very fascinating.
Yeah.
The Greater Good Science Center out of Berkeley, they have some amazing articles. I subscribe to their stuff. I get weekly article summaries and stuff. It's interesting.
Yeah, that really sounds interesting because I often say I work a lot with women. That's sort of my specialty area. And I often say that if I had a superpower, it would be that I could make people see themselves the way that other people see them, the positive way, because people often have such a lower estimation of themselves or view of themselves than other people are like, you're phenomenal. Are you kidding me? They're like, well, I'm all right. No. If I could wave that wand, you would see how everybody sees you.
Yeah, it's compounded here too, Polly. We call that Midwest nice.
That's double.
It probably is like Cape Cod nice too, but it's called Midwest nice around here because we just never. It's just it's how we grew up. It's just you just don't talk. You don't praise your own self. Praise other people, but yeah.
The ACA visit on Monday, and we were having conversations about how things were going, and my co-visitor, she's like, I am competent, and I'm so happy that I'm competent. And I was like, that's odd. Like, instead of like, I'm doing a really great job, but we just all were like, good, you're competent. Like, but we were like, that's like the nicest thing we may say about ourselves because we're in the Midwest.
Hey guys, it's Ryan from Media Services. Right now you have 30 seconds left till it automatically ends.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks,
Ryan.
Yep.
Ryan's learning a lot about women right now. This is your TED Talk, Ryan.
Gotcha. Well, 10 seconds.
Holly, would you like me to stay on so you've got another square to look at? Camera?
Whatever, it works. It's fine. I'm so used to it. There's so many people that don't keep their cameras on. It's all right.
Yeah, and from where we sit, we do that just so you, as the facility, like as the presenter, have the space and the stage stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. All right. So I'm just going to ask probably 2 or 3 people to just, if you would, unmute yourself and share with us a couple of things that came up for your group of what works for you when you are getting feedback. Helps you stay open to it.
Oh yeah. So we didn't get an opportunity. We were actually mid-sentence when we were in our discussion, and they didn't give us the warning that it usually does. It'll say like you have 1 minute left, and then it'll switch us back to the class. This time it just pretty much just cut us off and just sent us back, but that's okay. We had a really great conversation. Mr. Lee and we talked about I guess millennials and just different staffing, how you would approach them, and then what type of feedback, how it could be different. We talked about the positioning. When you're giving feedback, he was saying it's nice to have like a table in between two. And then we just talked about more or less, he's working with teenagers and high schoolers that are just getting out of high school. And then I'm kind of working with some freshmen, fresh in college. So we kind of had that in common.
Mm-hmm.
And how so just the different dynamics. Some think they're always right, no matter what. We talked about the generation and how it's different now. When it comes to the workplace and when you have younger staff. So.
Yeah. So you have to adjust your approach depending on maybe the age or the experience level, that kind of thing. Yeah. And yeah. I just want to go to the statement about having a desk between you. I would say yes, if it's something that's a formal set of feedback, but if it's really just kind of a growth and development conversation, not necessarily having a desk. Sometimes the most powerful conversations happen when you're, just walking somewhere, or you're having a cup of coffee together, or you're, working on something hands-on together, something like that. It just kind of opens up. So there's a time and a place for all of that. But thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes.
Anybody else want to share some of the things that they came up with in their breakout session? All right, so we got a shy group on today. So some of the things that I know are helpful is to meet people where they are, to understand, what they might have been experiencing when whatever the issue is that you're about to give them feedback is, and to be able to enter it with that curious mind and asking questions so that you can understand the situation and setting aside any assumptions or judgment about the situation, so that you can go into it really on kind of that, we want to work together to come to some resolution. When we come in and we're just like immediately dropping the hammer, that can set people on edge. If we come in and we act as if we already know all of the pieces when we've never actually given the person the opportunity to share their side of it, something like that, that can shut that conversation down. So thinking about all of those ways that you can kind of set the stage for having the open conversation can be really helpful. So as we think about setting that stage, it goes way, way, way back, right? We think about, if we have the opportunity to be thinking about it as far back as the hiring and selection process, then that's great, because then we want to think then about what's the role, what are we trying to fill here, what's the job that needs to be filled, what's the fit, who's going to work well with this department or with this team, that kind of thing. Oftentimes we either inherit teams or we inherit individual members who maybe move from a different team. Sometimes we don't necessarily have a choice about who's on our team, but what we do have a choice about is how we begin to create the relationship and set the stage. Relationships are super important. That's the foundation for everything that you want to have in place when you're going to be able to have conversations with people that really is investing in their growth and development. So thinking about getting to know them, what's their personal style like, what's their preference like. You might want to actually even do like a DISC profile or some sort of Myers-Briggs or something like that, where you can maybe have a shared conversation about that, so you can understand, I'm very quiet, but usually I am thinking about things and I really need some time to process it, or those kinds of things. That can be all coming up in that relationship piece. So when we think about relationships, this question gets asked of me all the time. What if you're just meeting somebody, you've only known them for 20 minutes and you have to give them feedback? That happens. I think we see it a lot. If you think about a situation, like if you go into a store and there's something that's maybe there's something that didn't go well in a store, and you have to have kind of a conversation with the customer service person or the clerk or whatever, you've just created this connection with this person, and how you develop that relationship is probably going to impact how far you get down the path. If you go in and you're calling them a dummy, or you're saying things that are disrespectful, or you're just kind of blasting them, they're much more likely to kind of shut that whole process down and not actually hear what you have to say, or be willing to try and find a middle ground with you. Whereas if you go in and say, I'm really frustrated by the situation. I know it's not you. What can we do here? That's creating a relationship, and every piece of that will help you to move forward. And obviously you're not giving them feedback about their job and how to do it better, but and that whole piece of, if you treat somebody with respect, you're going to have a much more productive relationship or outcome from the situation. So the next piece is about expectations, and the expectations piece is really, really important. It's important for you to understand and be very clear about and be able to articulate what your expectations are of this person with their job. It might be expectations about the actual tasks of the job. It might be expectations about their behavior within the team, their communication, when do we move from email to talking to somebody if we are going back and forth about something. Setting those expectations in advance is going to help people know what's the playing ground here. What's expected of me? What do I need to know about to understand what's happening around me, or how I'm supposed to participate in this? The other piece of the expectations is is understanding what that employer or that team member, what their expectation is of you. I'm going to give you some tidbits on how to achieve that in a couple minutes here. But setting those expectations and revisiting those expectations on a regular basis is really important, because if you start to lose sight of those expectations, or those are changing and it's not getting communicated to people, that's when we can start getting those gaps or having some of that derailment, and people are getting off track. But if you are very clear about it, and if an expectation changes, we have to understand, is it a temporary change? Is it a permanent change? Why did it change? That's an important piece as well. And then, what's expected of them as a result of those changes. The next piece is about training. And I'll give you an example. I'm working with a client right now who came to me about, 7 or 8 months ago, and she had hired for the same position. It's a small nonprofit organization. She'd hired for the same position 3 times for the same position. Think about how much time and effort goes into hiring somebody and having to do that, and get them onboarded, all of that, and then have them quit and then have to start all over again. She was exhausted, which is exactly why she contacted me. And so I started asking her questions about, what do you do to create the relationships? What do you do how do they know what's expected of them? What training do you give them? And her basic response was, I interview them and I hire them and I give them the job description and I give them passwords to the network and to their email, and I, that kind of thing. And then they're supposed to do their job. So, that's not really an onboarding process. That's not actually like creating this whole stage for success. That's actually just sort of pushing a lot of responsibility onto an employee. So once I started asking those questions, she had these sort of aha light bulb moments of, oh, I need to put more intention around this. And so now she's actually hired somebody into that position after we did some work together. She's hired somebody. It was a much smoother hiring process, much smoother onboarding process. And now they're still working on some of their communication things, but because of the way that she's approaching it now and really looking at herself and how she has handled things in the past and what she wants to do differently, she's having a different outcome. So that training piece is important. when we offer training to our employees, we have to make sure that that training is appropriate to whatever it is that we want from them. Is it, does it give them the tools? Does it give them the knowledge? Does it give them the resources? Does it give them any support information? Is there something that they can go back to and refer to it if they don't have, if maybe there's something that they don't use all the time, they need to go back and refresh on it? Do they have the opportunity to retrain on certain things? That's really important to think about, because if we have this training process where it's one and done and you can't go back to it, that's where people will get off track. So the next piece of this is support and supervision, and it folds in also with the relationship building. This is sort of the next level of relationship building. But when we think about support and supervision, anybody who was in my session last week about managing like a coach, I cannot stress enough that if you are not having one-on-one meetings on a regular basis with your team members, there's going to be a lack of support, or a feeling of a lack of support or disconnect that's happening with people. The one-on-one sessions really need to be, they need to be co-created. They need to be a conversation. It can't just be, bring me your to-do list and we'll go through your to-do list, because that's, that's a sort of scratching the surface on building and supporting that relationship. But having that co-created conversation as you go through will help you kind of ferret out the things that maybe are stumbling blocks or something that they're struggling with, that kind of thing. One-on-one meetings are important. Team meetings are important, and doing the same kind of setting the expectations within that team of how they interact with each other, and then supporting it through these connections. That's really important. And then also making sure that you are having, if there's a project specific thing or something like that, that you're having connections with folks in that way. I hear all the time when I ask people, how do you support your team? I hear this all the time. I have an open door policy. Open door policies are great. And I will ask the question of how often do people come in and take advantage of your open door? And they'll say, oh, they come now and then if they need, clarification or they have a quick question about something. Yeah, of course they come in. Great. So an open door policy is part of the way. Taking it the rest of the way is say, sometimes you gotta go and grab people and pull them through that open door and say, no, we're having this one-on-one. Or, hey, I noticed this thing is going on, or this project has been going on for a while. What's your perspective on it? Those kinds of things, just really intentionally making those connections with people and not relying on staff, especially if they've had a bad experience in the past with somebody who was not a great supervisor or was a punitive supervisor or something like that. They are very rarely going to come to that door and say, this is the help I need. This is what I need to share with you, those kinds of things. So making sure that you are proactively connecting with those folks. I like to think of those first 4 steps in this process as being your responsibility as the manager, as the leader, as the supervisor. It's your responsibility to make sure, have I done what I can to build this relationship? Have I done what I can to set the expectations, make those clear? Have I done what I can to train and retrain and provide support information, those kinds of things? And have I created a relationship with a person where they understand that I am here for support, supervision, and am actually here to help them be successful? If you have done all of that, that's where I say, yes, the side of my table, my side of the table is tidy. I've worked very hard to make sure that all of those things are in place. I've done everything that I can. Now we move to the accountability piece. And that's the accountability piece where you're having a conversation with somebody that says, this was the expectation. Is there anything unclear about that expectation? If yes, then re-clarify. If no, then, okay, so that was the expectation. This is how I am holding you accountable. You need to get up to par in this way by this date. And not only that, but it needs to be a sustainable change. So it's not a, I did better for a couple of weeks and then it drifted off again. No, it has to be a sustainable change. That's the accountability piece. But if you don't have these other pieces in place, holding somebody accountable will just feel like, oh, they're just picking on me all the time. They're not giving me all the information that I need. They're withholding information. They're withholding resources. They're not supportive. All those kinds of things. They just come and give me a hard time about things. So that's
you've got a question in the chat.
Okay, great.
You want to read it? You want me to read it to you?
You can read it to me because I always.
Yeah. So what if you did give training and they still are not meeting expectations?
Yeah, I might have just answered that question. Michelle, did I answer that question with the accountability piece?
Yes, you did.
Perfect. Good. All right. That's my idea, or that's the intention here, is to make sure that there's a very clear loop here. And the reality is that sometimes you get to this point and you realize I didn't do enough. If anybody was in my session last week, I talked about this client that came to me. She was having somebody who was really struggling. The woman was going to quit. My client was a manager at a call center. She wanted to fire this woman. She was driving her nuts. Turns out she had not spent any time building the relationship with her. She was making assumptions about the woman. And when she went back and built the relationship, whoop, all these things came clear to her, and it was a geographic change. She needed to change where this person's desk was. Super simple, but she had to go back and revisit that. So that does come up, is that as you're looking at this and you go, I wasn't that clear about the expectations, or no, there actually is something missing in the training, or it's changed maybe since the last time we talked about it, something like that. Then you have to make sure that your side of the table is clear. So once we get people in this loop, this actually becomes a very, it can take a little bit of, it can take a lot of effort, particularly if you do not have any kind of process like this. It can take some effort to get this into place, but once you've got this in place, this becomes the norm, and this is what your team, what your coworkers, what your colleagues expect of how you operate. There's no secrets. This is how I function. And once that happens, people get on the same track and they just start moving forward, and you end up, maybe you don't have as many giant fires that are flaring up here and there. There might be an ember here or two that you have to stamp out, but those big fires that come up, they will start to become less and less because you've got this really tight process to your growth and development. All right, so I promised I would share a couple of things that have worked well for me in a management role. This is one that I call the 3x3s. And this is something that I use, and you're welcome, by the way, to take any screenshots of any of my material. I am not, the copyright queen. There's a lot of brains that come together to make good stuff. So you're welcome to borrow and tweak any of this stuff. So where I use the 3x3s often is when I am creating a new relationship with somebody. Maybe there's somebody that's new to my team, they're new to an organization, those kinds of things. So this is where I would have the employee answer these couple of questions, and I give them time to think about it. I don't throw it at them in a one-on-one and say, tell me, what are the 3 things I need to know about you? Because I'm really, but give them time to think about it, write down their answers, and come to your next one-on-one ready to have this discussion. So that first question is, what 3 things should I know about you in order to manage you effectively? I have had somebody tell me, don't talk to me before my 3rd cup of coffee. Just don't do it. So with that person, we just don't have meetings before 10 a.m. They do their individual stuff, their emails, their projects, whatever, where they can drink as much coffee as they need to become human. And then at 10 o'clock, they know, all right, that's my expectation, is that you're ready for the day by that time. There may be other things that come up out of that as well. What approach works best for you when you need feedback and direction? Some people will say, lay it on me. I want to know. Just tell me. Don't sugarcoat it. Just lay it on me. And some people will say, I need you to kind of tell me about what it is and then give me time to think about it and process it. And then we'll come back and have a conversation. And you as the manager have to be adaptable and say, okay, I can work with that, because you are going to tell them what's going on, that, hey, we need to talk about this thing. You're not kicking it down the road. You're not ignoring it, but you are recognizing and acknowledging how that person's going to best internalize that feedback. What shuts you down to a growth process? Those kinds of things might be if you yell at me, if you treat me disrespectfully, if you make assumptions about things that I don't know, whatever that might come up there. But there can be some really great things that are turned up as a result of these questions. You as the manager should also offer some information in this situation. This is a great time to use this as an opportunity to share some things about you, because you may be a total mystery to them. Maybe they're coming new to the company, and so they have not had any kind of exposure to you at all. So 3 things that you should know about me as a member of my team are, I like to have a meeting at noon on every Monday so we can get the week rolling. I like to have everybody on Friday send me an email that says, hey, this is what I checked off my list today or this week. Whatever those things are, this is a great time to communicate those. When you have concerns or feedback for me, I would prefer if, and you can put in there whatever it is that you prefer. Let me know, send me an email, pull me aside, whatever those things are. And then my expectations for you as a member of my team are, that might be where you outline things like that no matter how tense or how difficult the situation is, communication will always be done respectfully, whether it's in writing or in person, it will always be done respectfully. You know, no infighting or backbiting, those kinds of things. That is not something that's tolerated on my team. Those are expectations that you can set now so that when somebody is coming onto your team, they can say, oh, all right, this is, and you have to stick to these things. And then this is what you can use when you have somebody new to your team, but you can also use this. Well, so what I often will do with this, if there's somebody that's new, I'll do this with them within the first week or two of them being there, and then I'll revisit it in 3 months or 5 months or 8, whatever. There's usually some sort of milestone that makes sense to revisit it and give people the opportunity to say, go deeper on their answers or to ask different questions. Maybe they'll come to you and say, here's the things, here are the 3 things that I'd like to ask you about your management style, or this is where you can start having the start, stop, continue conversation with people. What's something that you need me to start doing? What's something that you need me to stop doing? What's something that you need me to continue doing? So you can use this as an iterative process. It doesn't have to be a one and done process. Another example of how to do this is just, that if that feels too prescriptive, you can just give them a couple of prompts, and you don't have to give them all of these, senior thesis, but you might want to pick 2 or 3 or 4 of these that feel like they're going to get at the heart of what you want to learn about this person. So I feel most confident in an environment that is. It's just an open-ended prompt. Tell me what that looks like for you. It shuts me down when. I'm excited about, I'm concerned or nervous about. All of these different things will give you some insight. If you say, are you nervous? They'll say yes or no. That's a true or false answer. That's a multiple choice answer. You ask a multiple choice question, you're going to get a multiple choice answer. You ask if you say I'm concerned or nervous about, they will actually say I'm concerned or nervous that maybe I don't have all the information I need, or maybe I don't understand this job well enough, whatever those things are, rather than answering what they think you want them to answer. So this is just another way that you can kind of start those conversations. The one thing that I want you to be careful about if you use these techniques is to not make it a homework assignment that then goes, check, we did that, and you move it to the side and never come back to it. This really needs to be sort of the conversation starter, not the check, I checked it off the box and we're moving on to the next thing, because that will ensure, if that's how you handle it, that will ensure that people will say, well, she didn't really want to know what I was talking about. She didn't really, she was just doing this exercise that she learned at a training, and it didn't really mean anything. But if it's actually something that leads to a conversation and a greater understanding, and having people believe that you truly are investing in learning who they are, so that you can help them achieve their best and serve the company or whatever in the best way, that feels like an authentic and genuine point of connection. All right. So when we think about giving feedback, there's this, we call it the FAST technique. So we want to make sure that we give feedback frequently. We don't want to if you are waiting until the performance evaluation to tell somebody something that they are doing right or that they are doing wrong, you're doing a disservice to everybody. You need to be doing this on a very regular basis. And when you start doing it on a regular basis, you will find that it becomes just part of the culture of language within your team or within your organization. It just becomes like, oh, we're just having a conversation. It's not a feedback session. It's not a sit down and super formal thing. It's just something that we do on a regular basis, especially if we're sticking to those nuggets. We're not letting things grow into those mountains. It just is part of that culture of of addressing things as they come up. So make it frequent. Seize the feedback opportunities. If you see something happening, whether it's good or bad, take note of it and respond to it quickly. Don't wait 2-3 weeks, months, whatever later to say, remember way back then when this thing happened, yeah, that was no good, or yeah, that was good. Tune into each person's unique style because everybody's going to be different. Again, if you haven't done DISC, I love DISC because it's a very simple kind of way to understand or take a best guess at people's personalities. But tune into their personal style. If they are somebody who is a very outgoing people person and they're very, very people oriented, they're going to have a way of approaching the world or problem solving or those kinds of things that's different from somebody who's more reserved and very task oriented. So knowing that about your folks can help you to find out where you meet in the middle, particularly if you have a different personality style that's very different from theirs. That can be hard to find that place to meet in the middle, but if you tune into it, then you'll have a better luck at that. And then select the best feedback vehicle. And I say that part of this is, we want to, as much as possible, not give feedback in writing without some context. So it might be a follow-up. You might say, or it might be an introduction. Hey, I want to talk to you about how the project went with such and such client. Let's get together. So that's the introduction to the feedback process in writing. That's fine. Or after a conversation with somebody, you can send them an email that says, hey, thanks for meeting with me about that. Just so we're clear, this is what I took away from that meeting, and this is what I'm hoping you took away from that meeting, that kind of thing. But selecting the best vehicle is also about setting the stage. So we talked before about if it's casual, if you can just take a walk with somebody, there's something really sort of, there's like a biophysical connection that happens if you are physically walking shoulder to shoulder with somebody, not touching, but you know what I mean, walking side by side. That there's a thing that happens in our body. We think this person's on my team. We are walking together. We are going in the same direction, and so this conversation that I'm having is helping to move us forward. I can't explain it, but it works like almost every setting that I've used it in. Works really well. So choosing the right setting is really, really important. And again, you have to scale it up. If it's really severe, it might need to be held in an HR office. It might need to be held with a witness. It might need to be held, with some sort of documentation thing happening, whatever. But just making sure that you are choosing the right one and we're not skipping over steps. All right. So I'm going to come to that question in a second. Michelle, I see it pop up there. All right. So the next thing is that it needs to be accurate. We need to base it on facts. If you have somebody coming in and saying, well, I heard that so-and-so or that kind of thing, that's not a fact. There might be some merit to it, but you have to go and do some homework and make sure that you understand what's going on. Part of that homework might be asking the person that was accused or that was implicated or whatever, hey, tell me about that situation. I've heard some different things. I want to hear your perspective on that. Question your assumptions and check your emotions. So we don't want to be coming in when we're really ticked off about something. That's not a great time to give feedback. You might have to say, even when you're charged up emotionally, I need to but that's it. Like, don't let your emotions take over and start yelling or screaming or doing things like that. And also the other side of emotions is being careful that you're not sliding into a place of deep empathy where you're not going to give them the feedback that they need because you understand where they're coming from or you know how that feels or that kind of thing. So checking your emotions can go a couple of different directions. Questioning your assumptions is just because somebody has done something in the past doesn't mean that they did it in this situation, or just because it appears that something happened this way doesn't mean that that's the way it was. So you really need to get in there and dig that out. So checking the facts and reflecting. So before you jump into the situation, take some time to reflect on it and understand, is it necessary for me to give them feedback? Is there something that's going to be helpful for them to understand and do differently next time? Am I just holding them accountable to say, no, that was not okay? What is it that is important for me to give this feedback to them? And while you're in that, ask questions to gain clarity. Or I'm going to give you some tips a little bit later on about how to start these conversations. But that's a great place to start, is go into it with some curiosity. Like, I need to understand what happened with the situation. Tell me your perspective. That's a great way to start the conversation. The next thing is about being specific. I talked about this a little bit, but you want to come in with specific examples. And I'm going to show you a model here in a minute that will show you exactly how to kind of build a good feedback model. So share specific examples. On Friday at the meeting, this is what happened. And so that they know this is it. It's not a general, you always, or you never, those kinds of things, because those vague assumptions or accusations, that just does not help anybody. Explain the necessary next steps. So if there is a behavior change or a process change or something that has to happen in order to get back on track, be very clear before you go into the meeting what those are and how are you going to explain that and how are you going to hold them accountable? How are you going to check back on that? So have those conversations, have that ready to go in this conversation so that when they walk out of the room, they know this is what happened and this is what I need to do differently. And this is how I'm going to be able to do that. Building a dialogue is really important here. So asking questions like, what do you need from me? In order to get you back on track, what do you need from me? What is it? And here are the things that I want from you. And timely. This is the trickiest one. Sometimes, you're in the heat of the moment, or things are happening, or things are busy, or whatever, and we say, "Oh, I'm going to deal with that tomorrow. I'm going to deal with that tomorrow." And all of a sudden, it's a month later, or 2 months later, or something like that. I'm actually dealing with a client right now who had a major infraction by somebody, but they didn't address it until a month and a half later, and the person that is now being held accountable is like, well, what did you talk to me about it before? And there's all those kinds of pushback things. So even if you can't have the conversation today or right now, you can say, hey, next week when we're back in the office, we're going to have a conversation. Just know that I need you to, put a stop to this behavior or change this thing, or, whatever it is. Just kind of nip it in the bud right now, and we're going to come back to it in a week or next week or in our next one-on-one or whatever it might be. So providing it as close to the event as possible is helpful, both to keep people on track and also to make sure that whatever those details are very clear and people understand, or there's not any kind of muddiness that happens because it's too long ago. And redirect in the moment if it's possible. You obviously want to be really sensitive about saying to somebody, you don't want to say something like, hey, you're screwing that up, stop, especially in front of other people. That's not a great way to handle it. But if there's a way to say, hey, let me show you how to do this, or this is what's worked for me in the past, or something that's a gentle redirection that will get it back on track right in the moment, then that is definitely something that you should do. All right, so I'm going to go to Michelle's questions. How would you recommend doing yearly performance evaluation meeting? It's usually done the same way for each employee. So it really depends on your organization, Michelle. But the more that you can make it a co-creative process, something that they contribute to and you contribute to, and then you have a conversation about it, and that they walk away from that process feeling like they've had some ownership in the process and very, very clear about what their next steps are, what their action steps are, what their new goals are, that kind of thing. The more clear you can be at that time, and then building on it in every connection after that. You don't have to say, well, here's your 5 goals for the year every week for the next 12 months. We're going to talk about those goals, but you do want to have that reconnection to those, so that if people are doing things that are getting away from those goals or in contradictory to those goals, things like that, that they're getting that feedback as they go. Does that help, Michelle? Oh, go ahead.
It does help, but so then you're recommending not having it filled out, when you're sitting down with an employee and saying you get let's say it's a 1, 2, 3, 4 scale or something like that, and you have everybody 3s or whatever. You have basically it all pretty much filled out and everything all typed in there, minus maybe the goals, because you want to work on the goals together or whatever. So you recommend not having that part completed and sort of having notes and kind of doing it together, or?
Yeah, so typically what I do, if possible, we have identical forms, and I fill it out from my perspective and they fill it out from their perspective before we come into the meeting. And then we sit down together in the meeting and have a discussion about, oh, you gave yourself a 2, I gave you a 4. what's the gap here? What don't you know that I know, or what don't you see that I see, or vice versa? I gave you a 2, you gave yourself a 4. What is it that you believe gives that a 4? And here are the things that I think lend to my score of a 2. So yeah, having it filled out in advance just kind of gives you the pure perspective, and then coming in to have that conversation together. And sometimes some places will actually allow those 2 documents to get merged together, excuse me, particularly if it's done in an electronic way, so that then you can have the record of both of those, so that you can see and then make some notes on there about how do you close those gaps, whatever those gaps might be, or what the next steps might be. Is that helpful?
Very much so. Thank you.
You're very welcome. All right. So my last thing about fast feedback is to remember to balance the positive and the constructive, because oftentimes we get so caught up in I have to give feedback about that things are screwing up that we forget to say we need to actually be giving people the information they need to be able to continue doing a good job, or to take it to the next level, that kind of thing. So don't forget that piece as well. All right. So I promised that I was going to give you a feedback framework, and this is it. So this is the SBI model, excuse me, and this is from the Center for Creative Leadership. There's a lot of good stuff over there. So if you want to go learn some good stuff, they've got great things available to folks. So what we're looking at here is we want to be clear about the situation, the behavior, and the impact. So when we look at that, the situation, you want to anchor it in time and place and be specific about it. So you'll see that this is going to be a building process here. So during yesterday's morning team meeting, when you gave your presentation, it's very clear. This is what you were doing. This is when it was, and this is who was involved. So during yesterday's morning team meeting, when you gave your presentation, you weren't able to answer a few key questions, and your sales calculations were incorrect. So it's very specific. It's not something general that like you didn't do a good job on the presentation. That's too general. They don't know what that means. Being specific, you weren't able to answer the questions and your calculations were incorrect. And then the last part is the impact part. And this is important because we need to know why does it matter if my calculations are off, or I wasn't able to answer those questions. So this is where you put it on, what's the impact on, I'm sorry, let's go back to the behavior. You do want to make sure it's observable action. It's not an assumption. It's not something that you heard about. It's something that you observed and you heard and saw. So you can give very, very concrete feedback on it. The impact is on you, on others, on the team, on the task, on the company, whatever it might be, on the client, so that you can say, okay, during yesterday's meeting, you gave a presentation, not able to answer key questions, sales calculations weren't right. As a result, our credibility in the eyes of our stakeholders was negatively impacted, so that person knows exactly when it happened, what happened, and what the impact was. Okay, so if you want, take a screenshot of that. We're going to be using this here in a minute. So I'm just going to give you a couple of tips to start a growth and development conversation. These are really sort of nice entry points into having conversations. You probably noticed that I use a lot of times, for examples, I noticed that. And that's a really helpful way to say, hey, I noticed that this is happening. Is that accurate? Is that, what's going on with that? It just gives me sort of a nice entry point. Another wonderful one is one that I had used on me when I was a young professional, where my supervisor, who I respected immensely, said, I'm getting the impression that, and he said, is that the impression that you want me to have? And I said, no. And then his question was, well, what impression do you want me to have? And it came through as it wasn't judgmental. It wasn't making any assumptions. It was inviting me to an awareness about how I was showing up at work and giving me the opportunity to change that. So that's another nice entry point. Another one is, can you tell me about that situation with you and Jim? Seems like you and Jim kind of butt heads when you're talking about the budget, or you were butting heads about the budget, whatever that might be. Can you tell me about that situation? I'd like to get your point of view on. I'd like to get your point of view on how that project got so delayed. I'm curious about. Curiosity is really such the safest, easiest way to jump in and to understand what's going on. So ask questions that are not, they don't have the accusatory tone with them. They really are genuinely curious. I want to get to the bottom and understand what happened in the situation. You know, can you help me with that? Being careful not to put them too much in the driver's seat, but this is a process that you're working together. And I threw in the start, stop, continue model here, just so that people can remind people that this is a really, really nice way to ask people for quick feedback. Hey, what's one thing that you want me to start doing? What's one thing that would be helpful if I stop doing? What's something that you would like me to continue doing? And you, if you're asking that question, you better be open for the result or the responses, because it could be a variety of things. And some things you can start and some things you can't. But if you ignore that request, then that's not going to probably have them offer any information in the future. If you say, hey, I got that, I understand why you want me to start doing that. Here's why I can't do that, or here's why that won't work. But instead, maybe I'll do this, or, you know, that kind of thing. It's again, a conversation starter. All right. I'm going to send you off into some breakout rooms, and I'm going to ask you to go ahead and take a screenshot of this. And Ryan, we're probably gonna have to do a little, no, it should be all right, 10 minutes. So we're gonna send you out into breakout rooms, 3 to 4 people per breakout room. And I'm gonna give you 10 minutes to work on this. Once you get into your breakout room, pick one of these 3 scenarios. You do not need to do all 3. That's a lot to do in 10 minutes. But pick one. Maybe there's something that is sort of resonates with you as something that you're struggling with, or that you might have experienced, something like that. And work through that as a team. You can ask one person to be, you're going to be in there for 10 minutes. So I want you to have one person who is the manager or supervisor giving feedback, another person who is Stephanie or Travis or Jose who's getting the feedback. And then the third and fourth, if there's 4 people in there, will be observers and kind of giving feedback as you go along. Oh, I'm seeing people leaving. Don't leave. This is the good stuff. This is where you get to practice in this really safe environment. Oh no, they're dropping like flies. So we'll have you go out and do that. And then at about the 5-minute mark, we'll have you switch and rotate and have somebody else try out those roles. If it doesn't feel comfortable for you to be in a role play situation, just talk it through as you would handle it. Any questions before we go into that? Good grief.
All right, I'm gonna put the SBI one up so we can see it in the chat rooms, or should we?
I don't know that I can do that. Yeah, I'll go back to it so you can take a screenshot. I don't have the power to do that. Maybe Ryan does. Let me go back to it. There you go. All right, so Ryan, go ahead and send them the few people that have stayed, the brave people that have stayed, off into those breakout rooms. And if you're done before the 10 minutes, come on back and we'll have a discussion.
Okay, I set for 10 minutes, and there's the 1-minute countdown this time, actually.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. I tried to balance it best I could, but it looks like some people just didn't join the room, it looks like, but they kept changing their numbers enough that kind of threw off my room count.
Yeah, I know, there was a mass exodus there just a minute ago.
Yeah.
So as long as there's at least 2 people in every room, Ryan, that should work.
There's definitely one that's not, and I'm going to move her over to a different one.
Perfect, thank you.
It's a quick 90 minutes, Polly.
Really quick. I know there's still a fair amount of stuff to go through, but we'll blast through it real quick when we come back.
I only need a minute at the end, so.
Okay, good.
Jen, we could do a whole session on just this topic. Like, I mean, if
Oh,
we had a webinar, we could do like a whole, like, we could do a whole institute on just this.
I know.
yeah. I wish people would spend more time on it because it makes so much difference if you can have these kind of conversations with people. It's amazing.
I wonder how much is, people feel such an angst about feedback, right? I mean, because even as you're talking, you kind of get like this visceral reaction to the moments when we've had bad feedback.
Yep.
And it's like, I don't want to do that. It's uncomfortable. And, it's, but I think your example at the beginning was really helpful because it's like, let's lay a little bit of the groundwork going. How do you think you're doing? I mean, how are you feeling about things? And when you can put it on that kind of level where it's like, let's talk this through versus pointing fingers, so to speak, right? So I think that, but I don't know that that's everybody's experience because a lot of times when you're in those positions, you're never trained for them.
Right, exactly.
You just get launched into
a
them.
Huge problem. Yeah, it's like, oh, you have done such a great job as an individual contributor. Let's put you into a management role. We're not going to train you. We're not going to assess if you have actual like people skills or we're just going to shove you in there. Hopefully it
Sounds
works.
like higher ed to me, Polly.
I'm telling you. I used to do in person. I used to go into Boston and work with like State Street Bank, like a couple of those really big financial institutions where you'd think they'd have it dialed in by now. And I'd have 25 people in the room and say, and this is an intro to management, like 2-day curriculum that I'm doing with them. And I would say, okay, so tell me, how long have you been here and how much management training have you had? Inevitably, there was at least 50% that had been there 10 years or more in a management role with no management training. I was like, how? Who's not catching that? So, yeah.
Yeah, it probably happens more often than not in organizations, right?
Yeah. 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 And my example of the gal who's, didn't even think about, I wrote a job description. I told him what I wanted him to do and I gave him passwords and network access. And then what? What else? That's the God's honest truth. She was stumped. She just did not understand that she needed to do anything more than that to onboard. And that's where being on video is tricky because I have to like take, make sure that my judgy face doesn't show up. Like, are you kidding? But again, if people haven't experienced it themselves, that's the way they've been brought up, so to speak.
Well, right, it's almost like parenting, right? You parent like, not always, but I think, sometimes you parent like I know, like I have kids, but you parent like you were parented, and sometimes it's the same thing. It's all about your experience and your exposure.
Yeah. I mean, even when you don't parent exactly like your parents did, you've made conscious choices not to, your parents come leaking out at some point. Right?
Oh, good Lord. That happened in New Mexico, Polly.
Exactly.
Like, oh, I sound like my mother.
Yep. Do I have to say it 10 more times? Oh, wait, hang on. Charlotte, what are you doing?
It's funny, I get this is going to get edited out. I mean, this isn't a horrible story, Jen, but hopefully the chit chat will get edited at some point. But every time I'm pulling down a jacket, Polly, and I hear that kind of swish of the jacket, I always think of the moment when your kids snuck out of their cabin. You have to go searching for them like at 11 o'clock at night.
My favorite part was that we locked the window so they couldn't get back in, and they were completely stumped about how did they know? This is for anybody listening. We worked at a school with teenagers where I lived. Kathy was an administrator, but I lived in a cabin with 8 teenage girls, and I was 20-something years old. It was interesting. We had some very entertaining moments with those kids.
Well, and it was funny because their whole intent was to connect with the boys' cabin, and then we were like chasing all kinds of kids through the woods. It became this kind of, it was just this really interesting experience with the other stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, every time I put on a jacket like that, and I was like, that always runs through my head.
So
Should have written a book. Should have written a book.
When my son was a teenager, he was like, how do you know that's what I'm going to do? Well,
Lies in the back of your head.
A, I was a teenager. B, I chased a whole lot of teenagers around before you came along. Ryan, we have about 3 minutes. I forgot to glance at the clock.
2 minutes right now.
Perfect. Okay, good. Even better.
I didn't see the total. So we're still at like 20 total, I'm assuming. That's including us. Well, yeah, it is. Well, at least there are people who want to, work on that skill set. That's good.
Yeah. I just was seeing the pop-ups of people leaving. Like, come on, hang in there. Yeah, this is a safe environment. Try it here. Oh, well. Hopefully they got what they needed before then.
You got about 45 seconds until they all start coming back. Actually, no, I take that back. When I said 2 minutes, you had 3 minutes because there's still that 1 minute countdown after that.
Ah,
So
okay.
we really have a minute and a half left.
Okay.
All right.
That's all right. I'll just have to zip quickly through the last couple of things. Oh, look at that. In the participants thing, it pops up and says breakout sessions will close in 51 seconds. Helpful.
Yeah, I turned it off before just because I thought it'd be nicer to just have it go, but apparently this is nicer now I see it.
Yeah. I didn't have my participants window open before, so I didn't know if it was there or not.
It wasn't. Now it is.
All right, so 5 minutes, I can do it and give you the last minute, Kath.
It's a speed round.
Speed round. Yep. This isn't a chatty group with a debrief anyway, so. All right, so I'm not going to do a debrief now because we're running a little bit short on time. And I want to blast through these last couple of slides with you, but I do encourage you to take some time to just think about how that went and start practicing how to incorporate these kind of conversations into just your daily work, because there's good stuff that happens there. So we want to think about how we start developing that growth mindset, both in ourselves and in our team. And one of the things, this is adapted from a really great book. I mention it all the time. Tasha Eurich's book, Insight, Why We're Not as Self-Aware as We Think, and How Seeing Ourselves Clearly Helps Us Succeed at Work and in Life. I have to put it on there because I can never remember what the title is. She calls it a loving critic, and sometimes in professional settings, people don't like that. So I've changed it to caring deliverer. And what you want to look for in a caring deliverer, either being one or looking for one, is to commit to delivering that feedback in a way that actually feeds your team's growth and development. So again, customizing it, identifying best ways that work for them, looking for opportunities where you're going to be able to give that and it's going to be helpful and specific, all those good things. Addressing those patterns and themes and delivering the feedback that's private, individualized, frequent and timely, kind, but direct. That's one thing that happens sometimes is we get so caught up in trying to be kind that it turns into so much fluff. We don't actually get to the point of what we're trying to give somebody feedback about. And specific and actionable. That's really, really important. So we talk about the care and deliver from two different perspectives. One, becoming one, making sure that we are actually approaching giving feedback in that way. And two, looking for a care and deliver in our lives. So, or multiple. So you might say like, I want somebody who's going to give me feedback on how I facilitate meetings. And so you look for somebody who goes to your meetings a lot, who is someone that is going to be invested in being this care and deliverer for you, who will give you feedback on a continual basis over time so that you can try new things and get feedback on it and those kinds of things. So we don't want our moms to be care and deliverers because they aren't usually the most objective people. We want people who can be objective and can actually engage in that process openly. Developing the gracious receivers, what we think about here is just being able to commit to the fact that we're going to receive that feedback with grace. Whatever it is, to say, I hear you, thank you, and then taking the time to think about it, reflect on it, listen to understand, don't listen to respond. Responding really should only come after you've had time to kind of percolate on it and think about it and think about maybe how it's relevant or what you need to learn from it. And then asking enough clarifying questions so that you can fully understand the feedback. So those are the two pieces that are helpful in developing that growth mindset. And then engaging that growth mindset, we want to spend time cultivating your caring deliverer network. It doesn't have to be just one person. It might be people who are from different parts of your lives that you want to get feedback on. And then also developing your gracious receiver, because the more that you do it, the easier it becomes. You can welcome or embrace feedback by asking yourself, what can I learn from this? What opportunities are there for growth in this situation? So that will help you to stay more open to it. And ask the person who's giving you the feedback those questions as well. Like, what is it that you want me to learn from this? Or where do you think that this is going to lend to my growth? Requesting feedback that's framed toward helping you grow and develop is going to reset that relationship or reframe it in a way that is, moving forward thinking and growth oriented. And using all of these tools, think about how you can use it to manage up, out, around, down, everywhere. When you bring it forward and you use it often, then that will help you to redefine or grow your relationship with your team members, your colleagues, your supervisor, that kind of thing. And then once you begin to view feedback like this, whenever things come up, when we think about, oh, I'm learning something right here, that's when that feeling that we often get goes away. Mostly, almost completely. I've been at this a long time, and when someone says they want to give me feedback, I still get that little lurch in my belly, that little oh, and then I switch into my positive brain that says, nope, I'm going to learn something from this. So if you are willing to share in the chat box how you're feeling now, did what we talked about today change it? Hopefully it went toward the green a little bit more rather than toward the red. But if you would share that in the chat, that would be great. And this is who I am if you ever want to reach out to me. And with that, Kath, with no minutes to spare, I'm sending it back to you. Thank you, everybody. It was great to be with you.
Technically, there's still 60 seconds according, it's just 11:30. So we will, that was really great. And I'm trying to pop the chat open just to kind of see where people are right now. And the chat's not opening. That's really weird. Oh, okay. Yeah. So Jen has posted stuff for the After School Network, which is great. So Polly, thank you so much. If you all have further questions regarding today's webinar, please email the Wisconsin After School Network. Jen has placed that in the chat box. More information about a series of professional development opportunities in addition to this learning series can be found on the After School Network website, and that web address is also posted. Our next day camp webinar will be next Wednesday, May 4th at 10 a.m. Rhonda Mickelson, former director of the Director of Accreditation for the American Camp Association and a current staff member at Chile, Colorado camps, will be presenting on, oh my, I have all new staff, how will I get them trained? And I think with the rotation of staff right now and the challenges we're all having in staffing, this is going to be a big topic you don't want to miss. So we encourage you to participate in this discussion as we all continue to work to provide quality camp opportunities for kids and families in the state of Wisconsin. Polly, are you going to hang on for a little bit if people have questions? You did that last week. I don't want to make that assumption.
Yep, no, I'm happy to hang out if anybody has any
Okay.
questions or you have something that you want to kind of work through a little bit.
Super. So Polly will stay on. Otherwise, we will let you all go back into your day. Yeah, hopefully we'll see you next week. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi, my name's Sydney, I'm talking.
Hi, Sydney.
I was doing a training recently that was like hosted by the ACA, and as I was doing that, I noticed like there was some part about feedback, and it really intrigued me because I'm new to being in like a supervising managing role. And so I want to incorporate that, but it's hard because I don't have a lot of previous experience with it. So I was wondering if anyone has any suggestions for sources of like fairly simple like evaluation and feedback forms to use. And I'm hoping for nothing that's too like formal or long or complicated, because I have some of those at my current position. Like I have those on paper, but like really, does anybody off the top of their head or can link me to something that's like, just a page or two that I could use for, just like starting that process with my staff?
So when you say feedback, Sydney, do you mean conversational feedback or like a performance evaluation?
I'm thinking about something that's like in between, because we have like, for example, we have like 3-month sort of evaluations that are like at the end of a probationary period, and we were looking to do something during that time that was like a little bit more formal and not just conversational. But the form I had that was just like a packet, and I thought that's too much.
Yeah.
I'm looking for something that I can use as a jumping off point to have like a meeting that's like 30 minutes long or shorter.
Sure. Do you have a performance evaluation tool that's used for your annual cycle?
Yeah, I think that's the long one. That's more of an annual.
Okay. So typically what you want to do is you want to look at your annual performance evaluation and pull out the themes from that. So you don't want to replicate that, but pull out the themes from that. So if you're seeing that someone is, there are themes that your evaluation tool will get at, whether it's teamwork or leadership skills or whatever those different things are. And you can pull out the ones that are most relevant to that person or to that they're in, and then focus on those for your 3-month. And then you might want to choose a different section of that performance evaluation to look at 6 months or at 9 months, so that you're kind of teasing that out into smaller increments. And then at the end of the year, you can draw it all together.
Okay.
Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think so. I like the idea of using something that we already have, rather than, my idea was just like looking out for resources, and like I don't know even where to begin looking other than like ACA or the after school network, or not the anyway. So yeah, thank you, Polly. I think I can start there with the thing that I already have.
Sydney, are you a member of ACA?
I don't know if I'm a member. I don't know if I had to become a member to sign up for the training that I'm in.
Okay, so sorry, Polly, I jumped in, but a couple of pieces of information. One, if you've never been a member of ACA, you can join the first year for free.
Oh, okay.
So, and the reason I'm saying that is that you'll then get connected to what they call, ironically, what they call ACA Connect, which is a place where on ACA Wisconsin, you can actually post questions like that to people and send questions out into the field for people who might have information they want to share, right? The great thing about camp and youth development is that people are really more than willing to share materials, at least in my experience. So that would be another place to post that and just ask the question. Or there's a Facebook group called Summer Camp Professionals. It's a closed group, but you can join it. Where you also might want to post it, that you would get almost a nationwide, almost an international outreach to it as well. Kelly, am I missing anything?
Nope.
Sydney, what I would say too is if you're new to this, you do not want to overwhelm your system by trying to do all kinds of new crazy stuff.
Right.
So find a couple of things it's your existing tool or one or two other things. And then a year from now, once you've got a year under your belt of trying these things, you can then customize and say, well, what did I want that I didn't quite get out of that last year, or how can I tweak it? But really, like the first year of management, try not to overcomplicate, really just stay in tune with creating those relationships and systems and that kind of thing. And then you can always go up from there.
Yeah, I've definitely been focusing on relationships foremost. And I feel like because of a lot of other situational stuff like staffing being a challenge and other stuff, that I haven't had time to incorporate anything like feedback, like those like 3-month, 90-day probationary moments when we're supposed to like reflect on what their goals were and how they're doing in them and stuff like that. We haven't been able to like complete them on time. Basically, we've had to reschedule them a few times, and that's pretty frustrating.
Yeah,
I feel that the staff probably feel unsupported.
Yeah, if you run out of time, I would have them still. Where does the time actually? What time do you run out of? The actual meeting and processing it, or even just kind of getting the process out to them?
Basically, I want to be able to like schedule a time with them for them to come, like it's basically like availability problem, like our availability when we're not running the after school program is like really limited. And so I want a time that's not during the program to talk with them, because I'm not able to pull them out because they're supervising kids at the time. And so it's basically an availability problem. And since recently it has become worse because I have like 2 weekly meetings that happen before the program. And so that takes away from another day that I was able to like meet with people.
Gotcha. The weekly meetings, they're not with these folks that you're supervising?
Right. The weekly meetings are like supervisor group meetings. And then we do have a weekly staff meeting, and it's we try to keep it fairly short because of people's availability. We have to meet at night after the program is over. And so I haven't wanted to take up more time then, because it's like we're all hungry and tired. So I'd rather meet before the program, but people's availability is really limited.
Sure. Yeah, you might need to get creative there if you have a supervisor that maybe can step in and rotate so that they can watch the kids or do something, or,
My supervisor is currently subbing in the program.
Okay, so there's really tight. Yeah.
Yeah,
I would at least, even when the kids are present, just say, hey, listen, I want to make myself available to you. Do you want to stay after hours? Do you want to meet me at, I will make myself available for that. That might help them to feel more supported, just to know that you're willing to do it. You just don't want to encroach on their off time too much.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good suggestion, because I'm just assuming that people wouldn't want to do that or wouldn't be willing to, but I can definitely like suggest that and see if I have any takers.
Yeah, that's good. Good.
Sure. Anyway, thanks for talking it over with me.
Of course, you're welcome.
Yeah. All right, have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Michelle, I see you're hanging with us.
Okay. Well, so my role just recently switched to like supervisor. Like one of the staff that I've taken on sort of is a mountain. They have had like multiple things that they have not been doing that has not been addressed by previous managers. And from what I understand a little about the history is that this is like a repeated thing, like, oh yeah, we've addressed this before. They've not made the changes. Now, like I've inherited this person and I don't want it to stay a mountain, like, because like ultimately everything like falls on my shoulders. Well, I don't necessarily feel it's fair that I'm being held accountable for like all these other past things. I still need to get it fixed because it needs to be fixed regardless. I just don't know how to go about it, because giving the suggestions and saying like this is the expectation, that has not worked so far. Okay. So
yep.
We have 5 weeks left of the school year, and I kind of don't want to let it go the 5 weeks. I'm like, do I let it go and then we just start over fresh next year? Like address it, even though there's 5 weeks. I feel like we should address it. Like, so I guess I just don't know what I should do, like the next steps.
My feeling is don't kick it down the road any further. It's been kicked down the road a long time, and he, she, they, whoever it is, they're just going to come back in the fall with this, reinvigorated to continue to behave badly if they haven't been set straight. I would say, so are you familiar with progressive discipline?
No.
Okay.
Well,
So
yeah, it's like where you start with like a verbal and goes like to written and, so on. Okay.
yeah. Yeah. And so where it sounds like this person, so the first thing is that, is there any documentation that's come to you of interventions that have been done by previous supervisors or HR or anything?
No.
Okay. So you are starting fresh. You're starting
Yes.
fresh, addressing things that have been in place for a long time. Okay.
Yeah.
So your role is to pick out what the major themes are. So if
Okay.
the major themes are things like communication or disrespect or missing deadlines or whatever those major
It's
themes.
mostly not following like our procedures is mostly what it is.
Okay.
Like we can't send kids under age 8 to the bathroom like by themselves, but yet consistently sending kids by themselves to the bathroom under the age of 8.
Okay.
That's a training on like what the policy was. Like we've had a training on it, like
okay.
literally. And like each person had to like talk about how they do it at their own site. Like here's how we follow the policy because every site is different. We're all in school buildings. So if she said the policy correctly, but then when I'm there in program, she's not doing it the way it like correctly.
Okay. So the first thing that I would do, like, is she problematic in general? Like, does she have a bad attitude? Is she like?
No, she's older and just, I think, kind of just set in her ways, especially since it hasn't necessarily, it might have been like talked to, but there hasn't been really any like follow up or anything that says like, hey, we've told you like 3 times, like this is not bathroom policy, you're not following it here, and start that sort of progressionary discipline, So.
Okay. So the first, what my first step I think would be with her is to make sure that she understands what the policy is, which it sounds like she does. And then for you to get curious about understanding why isn't she following the policy? Is it that she doesn't have another way to let kids go to the bathroom? Is there like, what is it that's causing her to make that choice? Because she's clearly making the choice. She's aware of what needs to happen and she's making the choice to do it. So for you to understand why she's making that choice is going to be really important. Sometimes it's because we've always done it this way, or I don't see the reason behind it. And so if that's the case, then you move into helping her understand the why. And you can start by asking her, why do you think that this policy is in place? Policies are generally not just thought up out of the thin air. They're generally there in response to something or for a specific purpose. So ask her, why do you think that is? And that might help her get her gears turning of like, well, yeah, it's there because the kids could, get snatched up by somebody that's in the school, whatever those things are. They may run into somebody that they shouldn't be near, whatever. And then at that point, once it's clear that she understands what the policy is, and you have helped her to remove any roadblocks that might be in place of why she can't follow the policy, and you've helped her to understand the why of why she needs to follow the policy, then you have to get clear with her about, if you continue to not follow the policy, this is what's going to happen. And so what's going to happen is you'll be written up. Do you have like an HR team behind you that can help support you through a write-up policy, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think if we had to go down this road, I think that they would.
Okay, good. Because some places are like, HR team. I don't have an HR team. It's just
we have an HR team. Yeah.
Good. So typically I then put people on the progressive discipline policy or process, which looks like the first one is the informational meeting, that what we just talked about. Do you understand the policy? Why aren't you following the policy? That kind of thing. The follow-up to that would be, hey, Sarah, thanks for meeting with me. And you can do this in writing so that it's documented. Thanks for meeting with me. This is what you know, it was clear to me that you understand the policy and that, you know, that you have, that I have let you know that you need to follow the policy. So going forward, if the policy is not followed, then we'll go to the next step. Then if she really doesn't follow it, then the next step would be having her come in to a more formal meeting. And that might be where it's you and a supervisor, you and an HR team member, something like that, that says, look, we've met with you, we've done this written follow-up, we've cleared all these things on our side of the table to make sure that you know what's expected, You are choosing not to follow this policy. And if you continue not to follow this policy, the next infraction will be a suspension or a, you know, whatever those progressive steps are for you all.
Okay.
So at some point, and you'll have to decide where this is appropriate for you, she will probably need, if she's really just resistant and is not getting on board, then she'll need to be put on what is called a performance improvement plan. And the performance improvement plan is very prescriptive. It's a one-page document generally that says, basically, this is what you're doing, this is what you need to change, this is how you need to change it, this is when you need to change it by, and if it's not changed, this is what's going to happen. Super simple. And she has to sign that, and you know, then it gets on file, it goes into her personnel record, that kind of thing.
Okay.
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 It's not fun, but it's once you start doing this and really holding people accountable, not only does it usually kind of square up that person, but other people around will go, oh, Michelle's serious, I gotta knock this off too. So there should be some trickle down effect of like, yeah, I gotta step up to the line here as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, good. Good.
Yes. Sorry, I've been puzzling that one with like, how do I like go about this? Like, you know, my approaches were just not so far being very effective at all. So I was like, something I'm doing is clearly wrong because I'm not seeing change. So how do I like fix it and get us on the right track? So I think that this will help a lot.
Good. Good. And make sure that when you're communicating with her, you're really clear. Like, don't get, so a lot of people do, I don't talk about it in my session because it can be sort of controversial. People talk about the Oreo method. Like, oh, you're such a great teacher, you're doing such a great job. You can't let kids go to the bathroom if they're under 8 by themselves. And, you know, whatever,
Right.
And you do a nice job with this, whatever those things are, the Oreo method, because oftentimes people get, especially if they are kind of stuck in their ways or they, you know, whatever, they will often hear the good things and ignore the bad thing, ignore the redirective thing. So you can say something like, listen, you're a valuable member of our team, so it's really important for you to get on board with this because I know you value the safety for these kids, right?
Yeah.
So you can say things like that, but don't get too crazy into the fluff because the fluff can really drown out what you're really trying to get at.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much.
You're
Have
welcome.
a good day.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks.